You made it fast.
Front and center.
You made it fast.
Okay, 8:03. Ready?
Yeah.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Children's Environmental Health Day. We're kicking it off with the Pediatric Grand Rounds. I'm Perry Sheffield. This is Maida Galvez, and we co-direct the Children's Environmental Health team here at Mount Sinai. It's our pleasure to be here, and we thank you all for joining us. Today is Children's Environmental Health Day, which is celebrated on the second Thursday of October each year, where we uplift the progress that has been made in the field of children's environmental health. We celebrate the change makers and rally each other to keep working to address the outstanding environmental issues that certainly still remain and reducing inequitable burdens. So the goal of our team, our work, and this day, and the greater field of children's environmental health is to have healthy environments for children where they live, learn, eat, play, and/or pray, and sleep. So today's agenda, for those of you who didn't know you were coming to a Children's Environmental Health Day event, welcome. And you are welcome to join us for the other activities that will be happening later. After this morning's grand rounds, we have an informal networking session here. Lots of our materials up front that we're excited to share with folks. And then that'll be followed by our 10 a.m. session, Success Stories in Home-Based Asthma Services. We have an awards ceremony following that. And then we have some walking tours that will follow lunch. So today, nationally, is this Children's Environmental Health Day. All over New York State, some of our centers that are part of our Nice Check network are also celebrating. You see here are proclamations that were requested from local government officials in Syracuse, and we see the Westchester team. These are all part of our Nice Check statewide network, the Children's Environmental Health Centers network, which is the only in the nation state-based network. So we're very proud of that and happy to have some people joining us online from around the state as well.
And now we have the pleasure of introducing someone who is one of the reasons why Children's Environmental Health Day even exists. Dr. Alan Woolf. He's a pediatrician and medical toxicologist at Boston Children's Hospital and a professor of pediatrics at Harvard Medical School. He's co-director of the Pediatric Environmental Health Center at Boston Children's and also the Region 1 New England Pediatric Environmental Health Specialty Unit Director. It's just one of the first in the country, even before Mount Sinai. Dr. Woolf is past president of both the American Academy of Clinical Toxicology and the American Association of Poison Control Centers. In 2018, he received the Career Achievement Award from the American Academy of Clinical Toxicology, and in 2019 was named the Lewis Roach Lecturer by the European Association of Poison Centers and Clinical Toxicologists, the highest honor given to a toxicologist by that organization. Dr. Woolf has published over 300 papers on childhood poisonings and environmental hazards. He's also published 2 books, The Children's Hospital Guide to Your Child's Health and Development, and more recently, The History of Modern Clinical Toxicology. He is a past member of the Executive Committee of the AAP's Council on Environmental Health and Climate Change, of which our own Dr. Lauren Zajac is currently the chair. And particularly relevant to today's talk, Dr. Woolf is the first author of AAP's last policy statement on the safety of private wells as a source of drinking water by infants and children. We're so excited to hear his talk today, which is a long view on his career and how he blazed the trail for the rest of us in the field of environmental pediatrics. His talk will tell the story of his work ensuring healthy drinking water for all. But before we pass the mic to you, we'd like to present our first Children's Environmental Health Day Award to Dr. Woolf in honor of his contributions, incredible career, kindness, wisdom, and leadership. Thank you, Dr. Woolf.
Thank you so much. What a surprise. I was not expecting this. And it is a terrific honor to be here and to share this momentous occasion with you, Children's Environmental Health Day. And I entitled my talk, A Covenant with Our Children, Safe Drinking Water. I'm going to talk about that this morning with you. And I also ask for a little bit of your patience and understanding. Maida wanted me to frame this in my own experience in getting involved in children's environmental health. So I'm going to try and do that too. I haven't done that before, so we'll see how it goes. Nothing to disclaim. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my own career journey. How did I get to being involved in the Pediatric Environmental Health Center at Boston Children's, the Region 1 New England Pediatric Environmental Health Specialty Unit, and so forth. And then working with Lauren and Maida and Perry and Cappy and all the others in environmental health. I grew up in the Midwest and wanted to get away as an 18-year-old when I went to college. And so I went to 2,157 miles away from my home in California and went to Stanford University. And while I was there as a sophomore, I was having lunch at Tresidder Union, which is the sort of cafeteria for Stanford. And on the bulletin board, there was this 3x5 index card. And it just shows you how little things can make a difference in your life. And they were looking for a research assistant to help with some projects and had a number to call. So I called the number, I got involved. And as it turns out, it was two faculty who were working with Linus Pauling. And so I was working in Linus Pauling's lab for about 2 years. What he was doing was looking at environmental influences on metabolism and whether the metabolism was ordered or disordered, and could you alter the environment to bring a disordered metabolism back into order, which he called orthomolecular medicine. And didn't go very far, although you could say it was the beginnings of precision medicine, of trying to tailor people's environmental needs and their health needs to whatever illnesses they might have. Anyway, that got me thinking about the environment. And then I did my medical school at the University of Chicago. While I was a medical student in surgery, we noticed kids falling out of windows. And again, sort of their home environment and what were the hazards in that home environment. And so we wrote a case series up of 66 cases of children falling out of windows in Chicago over a number of years, and came to the conclusion that infants and toddlers especially had traumatic head injuries more often than older children because their centers of gravity were higher, and they were more likely to fall on their heads. And so this really got me interested in children's safety at home. These injuries happen mostly in the summer when they had screens in and the screens weren't protected, there weren't any guards. And if you look in the newspapers every summer, there are still a few children that fall out of windows in buildings, not only in Chicago, but New York and elsewhere. So then I went down to Duke, got matched to Duke to do my residency and fellowship training. I had an RWJ fellowship in pediatrics, and my mentors down there, Sam Katz, who was the head of the program, who had done some wonderful world-class vaccine research with John Enders at Harvard, and Tom Frothingham, who was an infectious disease specialist. And while I was there, I was working in a unit of incarceration for adolescents, and noticed that in this environment, they were getting injured a lot. So again, we did a little epidemiologic study of incarcerated youth and the injuries they suffer while they're held in a maximum detention center. This was in Butner, North Carolina, and came to the conclusion that they were most at risk. They were at highest risk within the first 30 days after they were incarcerated. And we postulated that during that time, they were under stress, obviously, and there was also, they were working their way into the social pecking order of the system, more easily getting into fights, adapting to their environment. And as a result of the research, actually North Carolina changed how it supervised youth who were sentenced to be incarcerated for the first 30 or 60 days after their incarceration. And then I went up to Boston, became faculty, had some mentorship from these two guys, Fred Lovejoy and Michael Shannon. They were both interested in toxicology, poisoning, and I got board certified in that specialty and then ran the Poison Center from 1987 to 2001, along with my very close colleague and friend and brother, Michael Shannon, who was also very much involved not only in toxicology, but children's environmental health and environmental toxicology, and was involved until his death. This is a case that we had while I was at the Poison Center. This was a 16-month-old who presented to the local emergency department, and the young mother claimed that the child suffered burns after ingesting nail polish and sitting in it at home. So we were contacted and consulted as to, was this a child abuse case? You know, since her story of nail polish, child sitting in nail polish and having this degree of burns just wasn't consistent. So when you have trauma that's kind of inconsistent with the story, you start to suspect that it might be a case of child abuse. So we had these pictures, and you can see the burns on this child were on the stomach and the back of the leg, as though the child was sitting in something. So we said, don't file yet. Let us see what the product is and what is this mother talking about. And this is what she was talking about. She was actually talking about a nail primer to put on artificial nails at home. And I don't know about this firsthand, but apparently in order to put on fake nails, you have to kind of scar up the nail. You have to make it so that it can hold the polymer, the acrylic polymer. And so they were sending home in these kits, these home do-it-yourself nail kits, 100% methacrylic acid, which is more caustic than hydrochloric and sulfuric acid. And so we looked into this in terms of how often these injuries were occurring, and they were occurring across the country. Dozens of kids were being exposed, and some of them had esophageal burns. They were ingesting it. If you look, it came in a little brown bottle. It was not with any childproof caps. And we filed a petition with the CPSC, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and got the manufacturers to change this product and get rid of the 100% methacrylic acid to try to stop these burns from happening to children. So again, this kind of got me involved in children's environment and the unexpected hazards that they have in their home. So I want to turn now from that to talk a little bit about water, the title of the talk. This is from a wonderful poet, Robin Cox Lewis, who is the poet laureate of Los Angeles, who talks about water. Later, when people asked us, where did you come from? We could only answer water. A whole language comprised of just one word. We walked onto the water. We built houses on the water. We had babies on the water. We sewed clothes made of water with needles made of ice. and these are her words, in every culture, the oldest memory is water. So I thought I would sort of bring you up to date on drinking water, not only for children, but for adults, and some of the issues that we're facing there. And for learning objectives, just to list some of the common contaminants of drinking water and talk about strategies that we can counsel families about to improve the safety of their water. Where do we get our water? Here in New York City, you get your water from reservoirs, and that is surface water. And the other source are groundwater aquifers, and that is well water. And this is a cartoon that depicts an artesian well under pressure and an aquifer. An aquifer is not like, it's not an underground river of water. It's not flowing water underground. It's water in permeable rocks like clay or shale or sand or gravel, sandstone or limestone. So it's water contained in this part of the geology that we tap into when we drill a well. It's dynamic. It doesn't stay there. It flows in this layer and can change over time. When we talk about water contaminants, this is a problem not only in New York State, but this is a problem in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Vermont, and all over the United States. And it's, of course, a problem worldwide. And it's estimated polluted water and poor sanitation kill about 1.4 million people every year. This is an issue of environmental justice and serving the underserved who are more prone to contaminated water, not only in the United States, but everywhere. Some of the sources of pollution include industry, mining, military bases, agricultural concerns, urban and rural runoff, sewage and wastewater, natural contaminants, and landfills. When we talk about water pollution, we're talking about the contamination of water that's intended for human use. And that is the source water that we drink. And both surface water and groundwater, of course, can be contaminated. These are some of the common contaminants that we run across every so often. We are consulted as a pediatric environmental health specialty unit about some of these. They include microbials such as Vibrio, Shigella, Salmonella, the coliforms, which are kind of the index microbial content of water, organic chemicals, perhaps most frequently PFAS these days, inorganics like lead, arsenic, nitrates and nitrites, and others such as salt or total trihalomethane, TTHM, which are disinfectant contaminants that often contaminate municipal water when they're disinfecting it. We also see radon can be dissolved in water, and so you can be exposed to radon while showering. That's another source. So I want to talk a little bit about Cape Cod. Cape Cod is a part of Massachusetts and very well-known and well-used recreational site for tourists, literally millions of visitors to Cape Cod. And when I first got to be a faculty member, I was approached by the Cape Cod Planning and Economic Development Commission. And what they were concerned about was they had noticed in some of the municipal water in Cape Cod, they were getting some levels of organic chemicals. And they were small, they were minute, but they didn't know why. There are no major industries on Cape Cod. And they were worried that these contaminants might be coming from homeowners and from renters. There were a lot of artists on Cape Cod who were using solvents and volatile organics and compounds like that. And so they were worried about their drinking water on the Cape. It's what we call a sole source aquifer. They get their water from one aquifer, and the Cape has kind of sandy soil, gravelly soil, so that if you took your old automobile motor oil and dumped it in your backyard, by the next morning you'd be drinking it. It was that permeable. So they wanted to do something about that. And so we collaborated to do a toxic waste collection date in 1983. That was the first one that we did. And as you can see, we set up sites throughout the Cape and had a day when people could bring anything they had at home that was toxic and turn it in. And we were contracting with Clean Harbors, which was a company that would clean it up and haul it away. And so we did a study, we did an inventory of what people brought on these couple of days that we had this hazardous waste collection program. And we were surprised. Actually, they brought a lot of stuff. Groundwater contaminants included paint, arsenic, and lead arsenate, which is a pesticide that used to be used in the South for cotton, in Massachusetts for cranberries. Liquid pesticides, chemicals, solvents, fertilizers, and solid pesticides. So we thought this made a difference in terms of the hazards to the drinking water from a sole source aquifer on Cape Cod. And apparently the Planning and Economic Development Commission thought it was a success too, because this is the one that they just had this year. And now they have these collections, these hazardous waste collections 4 times a year. So from 1983 to 2025, we're still going with this project and trying to keep their drinking water safe. So as that is a background of how one area, Barnstable County, dealt with the threats, I just want to talk briefly about other threats that all of us face today in terms of the safety of our drinking water. You all know about lead in water. I don't have to tell you the EPA's goal for maximum contaminant level is a 0 parts per million. Its current MCL is at 10 parts per billion. And the map on the left shows the communities around the United States whose drinking water has lead in it greater than 1 part per billion. And again, this is an issue of environmental justice. The map on the right shows you out of compliance by those communities that are at highest risk in terms of being disenfranchised and inequitable. It's estimated that 186 million people drink contaminated water greater than 1 part per billion. 61 million drink greater than 5 parts per billion, and 7 million drink water that's greater than 15 parts per billion of lead in it. So that's a specific threat that we need to deal with as a country. Fracking is another specific threat. That is the fracturing of geology, rock, to extract natural gas. And in that process, they use millions of gallons of water to do that. And they contaminate the water with chemicals such as these that are listed. And fracking can be associated in nearby communities with changes in the water's pH and conduction. There's inadequate aquifer recharge because of the amount of water they're extracting via fracking. And then inadequate wastewater disposal can also threaten a community. So fracking is another threat. Here's another threat you may not know about. Computer server array data centers, which are now under construction, not only in the United States, but elsewhere. And these are hundreds of servers in order to facilitate artificial intelligence that are being constructed by companies. And it's estimated that an array that is a 10 megawatt array uses somewhere between 13,000 and 45,000 gallons of water per day. High volume water usage inadequate aquifer recharge are some of the threats from this practice, which is growing. These servers generate heat, and so what the water is doing is cooling them to keep them running at their maximum capacity. But it uses a lot of water in some of the infrastructure that's needed for these data centers. Where did I find out all of this? ChatGPT, of course. So another threat, disasters, and y'all know this, but flooding. After flooding of the Ohio River in Kentucky in 2011, the water contained E. coli, adenovirus, enterococci, campylobacter, salmonella, and a lot of metals up to 3 months later. The Fukushima earthquake and tsunami and the nuclear reactor meltdown, radioactive iodine, cesium, strontium, and plutonium were detected in tap water for months after that disaster. Climate change is producing water insecurity around the world. So these extreme weather events, including temperature change, hurricanes, drought, flooding, changes in saltwater intrusion and salinity, surface water runoff, leaching of contaminants, altered water consumption, and inadequate aquifer recharging. All of these are also a threat to our drinking water. I want to move on to talk about the sources again. And community water systems or municipal water systems use a multi-step approach, primary, secondary, and tertiary filtration to ensure that drinking water is in compliance with health-based primary standards set by the EPA, the maximum contaminant levels for public water. And they have to measure municipal water quarterly, and they have to notify consumers in many states if the water is out of compliance with state or federal regulations. That's municipal water, and so they're constantly testing it for these index contaminants and making sure it falls within compliance. 15% of the population, or 43 million people in the United States, are on private well water. It's not regulated at all. There may be some local regulations, especially when new wells are drilled, but in terms of maintenance and testing of well water, it does not exist in many parts of the country. And there's no guidance and certainly no regulation of how often the water has to be tested. As you can see on this picture on the right, this is what the well looks like. There's a submersible pump. It has a screen that filters out the sediment and other contaminants. There's a casing. It goes into a pressure tank in the home and usually a holding tank. And you can see on the left is a picture of what a well cap looks like. That's a well. And you can see that little lighthouse they put next to it so they wouldn't run over it with a lawnmower. So this is a case that we got back in 2002. This was a family home. Its proximity to wetlands and distance from the town water main prohibited connection to town water. So the family drilled the well and drank the well water for 5 years without testing it. The water was turbid. It had a metallic taste. It left an orange-brown residue on their clothes, dishes, and appliances. They got it tested finally when the mother noticed that when she watered the plants outside, the leaves had kind of a coppery sheen on them. After 5 years, water testing showed a manganese level specifically that was many times higher than the EPA reference level for manganese. At the same time, we saw their 10-year-old son at Children's Hospital who was in the 5th grade, had elevated blood and hair manganese concentrations. The teachers had noticed that he was inattentive. He had a normal IQ, but unexpectedly poor verbal and visual memory, which is typically seen in chronic manganese poisoning. And we think he also had a genetic defect that limited his ability to use manganese as he should and excrete it as he should. But his memory was far below what it should have been. And we thought that might be due to the contaminated well water that the family had been drinking without testing it. When many people buy a home, and if the home is on a private well, they just don't know. They haven't done that before. They may not be aware of their responsibilities in terms of well maintenance and well testing. Here's another case we had. This was in 2014. This came to the Pediatric Environmental Health Specialty Unit. We were consulted. This was a 4-year-old in good health. The mother worked at New Hampshire's Peace Trade Port for 10 years and during her pregnancy. Her child was in daycare. The mother heard that water contaminated with perfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, for over a decade. And she wanted her child's blood tested. And this was the case that got us looking into the Peace Trade Port. And this got us involved with perfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, which, if you don't know what they are, a family of thousands of chemicals. They're resistant to water, oil, grease, and fire. They're used in everyday consumer products. You may know them as Teflon pans. They're persistent organic pollutants. They have long half-lives and they're not metabolized. Their medical effects so far, they cause dyslipidemia, increased cholesterol, thyroid effects, possibly immune effects, antibody production to vaccines. They have effects on pregnancy and are suspected of being carcinogens. And I put two of the oldest ones here, PFAS and PFOA. And you can see they're straight chain aliphatic carbon with fluorine that's attached to them. And if all the side chains are fluorinated, then it's perfluorinated. If only a few of them are fluorinated, then it's polyfluorinated alkyl substances. In terms of the Peace Trade Port, it used to be Peace Air Force Base from 1956 to 1991. Starting in about 1970, they trained military to put out airplane fires using material called aqueous film forming foam, or AFFF. And the Peace Air Force Base was decommissioned in 1992, and it was repurposed to create a trade port with commercial facilities. It had two daycare centers, 250 businesses, 9,000 workers. In 2014, the EPA asked the Air Force to test the 3 wells, and you can see the chart on the right. The Haven well was out of compliance in terms of PFOA and PFAS. At the time, the compliance was 0.07 by the EPA mics per liter, and at least one of these wells was out of compliance during testing. So the family wanted their blood tested, and actually, as it turns out, many of the 9,000 workers in the Peace Trade Port also wanted their blood tested for PFAS. And this was quite controversial at the time, as you can imagine, since it was quite costly to do this. But in fact, we did test more than 1,500 people in terms of the PFAS levels in their blood who were exposed to the contaminated drinking water in the Peace Trade Port, New Hampshire. And this is what we found. These 3 graphs are for PFOA, PFAS, and PFACTs, the 3 sentinel PFAS compounds. And you can see from the circles, these were the results of the population in the Peace Trade Port. We tested children as well as adults. And NHANES data was kind of the normal population, what PFAS levels were in a random sampling of US adults, mostly by the NHANES federal survey. And you can also see some of the bars in the upper were already known PFAS contaminated areas in Decatur and the Ohio River Valley and in Minnesota, where they had known PFAS contamination. And for PFAS and PFOA, the levels in New Hampshire weren't that different from those that are seen around the country, and certainly not as high as those in known contaminated sources. But the third one, PFACTs, and remember I said these are thousands of compounds. And so they may not all be elevated, but at least one of these was quite elevated over the rest of the population and showed that there was indeed a problem at the Peace Trade Port, and it had to be remedied, and people were concerned about it. Since 2014, the EPA has lowered the maximum contamination limit for PFAS compounds from 70 parts per trillion back in 2014 to 4 parts per trillion of PFOA and 4 parts per trillion of PFAS, and you can see these others. And so far, over 2,800 sites around the country have detectable PFAS in their water. So this is another threat to all of us, including our children, in terms of their drinking water. Definitions of covenant. Well, there's a biblical definition of covenant, and that is a coming together, a sacred obligation, God's covenant with Moses, Abraham, and there are 3 different modern versions of covenant. There's a legal one, a binding clause in a contract, a religious one, a solemn agreement between God and humans, and then the general one, which I think is what we all are celebrating in Children's Environmental Health Day, and that is a formal and binding agreement or promise to our children that they will have safe drinking water in the future. Children, we know, are more vulnerable. They consume 7 times as much water per body weight as adults. They get a higher dose of toxins as a result of that. They have a longer lifespan for those toxins to have effects on their metabolism and their body systems. Infants drink formula mixed with water up to 32 to 36 ounces a day. Young children's skin is more permeable to water, and their brain, their GI tract, their other organ systems are still developing. There are increased water requirements during pregnancy and lactation, and the placenta is permeable to many toxins, and this makes the fetus that much more vulnerable to contaminated drinking water. So I've given you kind of the overview, some of the threats that we all face in terms of safe drinking water, where that comes from, and how do we counsel families to keep that covenant. Well, might have mentioned this, which is the American Academy of Pediatrics' latest policy statement on drinking water from private wells and risk to children that we made a few years ago, and which is still in effect today. And so the recommendations are annual testing of well water for coliforms and nitrates, annual testing for dissolved solids and pH, every 3 years for chemicals, maybe every 5 years for solvents, if that's a problem in the community, and then know your local community if there's a reason to test for other chemicals besides these. So annually for at least nitrates and coliform bacteria. And then we also recommend additional testing for newly built or reconditioned wells after a flood or a disaster, If there's a newborn in the household, get the well water tested, repair and replace any of the well system, and then test the water after you remediate it. Test the water if conditions near the well have changed, new industry, construction, if you've noticed a change in the odor, color, or taste in the water, or if there are known problems with groundwater or drinking water in the area. So these are just a few of the circumstances in which well water ought to be tested even more frequently. So I have some top five recommendations for us and for families. Here are the ones for families. Ensure that a child is adequately hydrated. That's, of course, important for all of us. Use cold water for cooking and infant formula, since hot water can sometimes concentrate some toxins, including lead. Check state and local water advisories. If notified drinking water has contaminants, use an alternative source or install an effective NSF-approved filter. NSF is not the National Science Foundation. It's a different NSF that is in the business of recommending filters and testing filters to see if they're effective against chemicals like PFAS. Test your private well. If the water is possibly contaminated, you should use filtered or bottled water. If in doubt about the coliforms, not all coliforms are E. coli, and some of them are benign, but if it's E. coli, we recommend that you boil the water for at least 5 minutes and then cool it before you use it. And then some recommendations for us as clinicians. We really should, at least during well childcare visits, be asking families where they get their drinking water. We should provide well water testing guidance if we're working in rural areas or have families from those areas who may be on well water. We should help families prepare for water emergencies, backup, that they should store filtered water in case of a flood if they're in a flood zone, or bottled water. Know your community, that is, know your water surface, know your flood zones, and check for any water or fish advisories in the area. And then advocate at the community level for safe water. And I just put this, this is a bill that we've been advocating for in Massachusetts, which is an act to protect drinking water quality in private wells. And this legislation is under consideration by the state, and it would provide resources to families who have private wells to get their wells tested, and to help them avert the cost of remediating their well if they need to install special filters, reverse osmosis, or other recommendations to make sure that the well water is clean. We feel that, again, this is an issue of equity, that those who are on private wells shouldn't have any water that's less safe than those who are on municipal water. So I've listed some drinking water references here, including hotlines for well owners. And y'all know the PESHU, the Pediatric Environmental Health Specialty Unit. If a family has a concern about their drinking water, that we're ready to help them. And again, appreciate your attention this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Woolf. That was so wonderful. Really appreciate you being here. We have time for some questions from the audience or in the chat. If anybody wants to write some questions in the chat, feel free. Any questions in the room? Yes.
Are current federal policies adequate? Sorry.
Is anything that's going on in the federal government that might there's so many things going on. I don't want to point out one in particular. Are you concerned about that and the effect it's going to have on child health insurance?
Well, yes, I think we all have to be concerned about the direction and some of the decisions that are being made at federal levels, including in the Environmental Protection Agency, that the science may not support. And that's true not only for drinking water contaminants, but for many toxins that are air pollutants, water pollutants, and others. So, yeah, I think there's a concern that we want to follow the best science in making legislative and setting standards to safeguard the public and to improve the water quality for those who are at most risk, those who live in environmental justice communities.
We have a question from Christopher Clemens online. What about PFAS levels in cow's milk? We often recommend for healthy bones and growth. Is organic any better? Feed versus grass-fed?
That's a great question. So the question is, what about PFAS levels in milk and dairy products? And originally, this was thought to be a problem of drinking water, PFAS in water. That's even in the early 2000s, there were already concerns about PFAS in drinking water. And certainly what I showed about New Hampshire and the Peace Trade Port, that was concerning their drinking water. But since that time, it's been realized that there are PFAS also in biosolids and in soil amendments. So PFAS in fertilizers or biosolid fertilizers that they're using on farms. So it's getting into plants, and some of those plants are what the cows are feeding on. So there's a risk for PFAS in meat and in dairy products and other foods. And hopefully at the state level, there's testing of farms and their products so that these don't make it to the commercial stream, that they're not in stores. But there's at least a theoretical risk that dairy products and meat and other foods can also contain PFAS. It's not just drinking water. Yes.
One is association of PFAS with thyroid cancer, or I mean, that's one thing that worries the endocrinologist. But also another question is, how can we test for it? Like, is there commercially available tests or data or normative data?
Okay, so two-part question. One is the health effects of PFAS, and this is still an ongoing area of research. But we're concerned about either hypo or hyperthyroidism, that PFAS in different individuals can cause thyroid dysfunction, and it can go either way. Hasn't been seen so much in children as it has in adults. In terms of thyroid cancer, I haven't seen any literature about it causing thyroid cancer, but certainly testicular cancer, prostate cancer, there are concerns about breast cancer. The NCI is now doing some studies around PFAS associated with leukemias. They're concerned about that too. So yes, it's a carcinogen. Your second question was, how to test for it. Yes. Another controversial area is testing the blood for PFAS, which you can do. First of all, there are a lot of problems in terms of the technology. Remember, the units that I was showing are micrograms per liter, and that is parts per trillion. And when you're measuring things in parts per trillion, there are some technical issues you need to solve. Our hospital's own lab could not solve the technical issues associated with testing for PFAS. So we send it out to commercial labs. You can test blood for these compounds. And what you get back depends on the lab. So some labs will test for 11 different PFAS compounds. Others may test for 5 or 7 compounds. They're not all the same tests. And how to interpret those tests is a real challenge to clinicians. And so that's another area where we need some further research and further clarification in my own mind as to who do we test and when, and what do we do with the results? How do we counsel families when we get the results of PFAS in their blood? It's a great question. Yes.
I'm curious about the safe drinking water legislation you were talking about in Massachusetts. Have you guys encountered opposition to that? And if yes, like what form is that opposition taken?
Yeah, so this is the new initiative in Massachusetts to add some resources for owners of private wells to test their wells and to remediate those wells if they're found to be contaminated. And as you can imagine, with all legislation, there's some pushback. And there's some pushback from those who say that these are private homeowners have undertaken that responsibility and should be responsible for the costs. We shouldn't use taxpayer dollars for these new initiatives that won't benefit all of the taxpayers. So that's the pushback I've heard. But we've endorsed it. Boston Children's Hospital's endorsed it. They've lined up a number of organizations that have come out in favor of this bill, and they're going to be reading it out in December. So we'll see what happens.
Any other questions? I don't see any more online.
If not, just another round of applause for you, Dr. Woolf. I can't think of a better way to have kicked off today's celebration. It is so inspiring to hear about how an expert and astute clinician can be so impactful, not only at the patient level in terms of identifying the root cause of the problem, but also at the policy level, and how you've been a powerful force for change in this world. And it's inspiring to hear your
Thank you
talk and
very
your
much.
career. Yeah,
Appreciate
thank you.